Kaitlin Armstrong, a tragic tale of hatred and jealousy that led to the murder of professional cyclist Anna Moriah Wilson. May 11th, 2022, Wilson, who was visiting from California, had been swimming and went out to eat with pro cyclist Colin Strickland. Police documents say Strickland was hiding his relationship with Mo Wilson from Armstrong, who he had been dating for several years. Later that day, Wilson was found dead at her friend's home in East Austin. A vehicle that looked like Armstrong's was seen on surveillance video near the home. Kaitlin Armstrong was brought in for questioning on an unrelated warrant and let go by mistake. When police did issue an arrest warrant, Armstrong was MIA. She was eventually found hiding out in Costa Rica. Armstrong's sister's passport and a receipt for plastic surgery was found inside her locker at Don John's Surf and Yoga Lounge. Armstrong was brought back to Texas, booked into jail, and charged with murder. Fast forward to fall of 2023, right before her murder trial, she was caught on camera trying to escape custody while Travis County deputies were escorting her to a doctor's appointment in South Austin. In November of 2023, a jury came back with a guilty verdict for Kaitlin Armstrong in just over 2 hours, 90 years behind bars, and a $10,000 fine. She'll be eligible for parole after serving at least 30 years. Armstrong's appeal process is in motion. I'm Good Day Austin anchor Casey Claiborne. Thanks for tuning in to this digital exclusive Crime Watch Extra with Fox 7 Austin Crime Watch reporter Meredith Aldis and 7 on Your Side reporter Carissa Lehmkuhl. So the Kaitlin Armstrong case was a big story for almost 2 years. For those who may not know how news coverage works, y'all both covered the story, you both covered the trial. Meredith at night, right?
Yeah, night, and she was in the morning.
During the morning. So you've got sort of different perspectives, and you saw different things in the trial. We're going to talk about what y'all saw and some of the insight into the case and some things that you may not have seen or heard on Fox 7 Austin. Let's take a look back first to May 2022. Anna Moriah Wilson was killed on May 11th. Here's one of the first stories we ran about the murder. We didn't know names at the time. We just knew the street, Maple.
Police are investigating a suspicious death in East Austin. This happened on Maple Avenue near East 17th Street overnight. A woman called police saying she found her friend inside her house unresponsive and there was blood near her. When officers arrived, they found the victim had gunshot wounds. EMS provided life-saving measures, but the woman later died from her injuries. Police do not know how long she was inside the home, but did call her death suspicious. It is unclear if a gun was found on scene.
Okay, let's start with that first day, the day of the murder. During the trial, what did we learn about the timeline of the murder?
Yeah, so from what we know, Wilson was in town, Moriah Wilson was in town for a bike race that was just outside of Austin. She texted Colin Strickland, said, hey, do you want to meet up? I believe they both separately went on their own bike rides that morning, made plans to meet up during the afternoon, and then that's when they ended up hanging out. They went to Deep Eddy Pool, as a lot of people may know. They went to Pool Burger. What's interesting is, even though it seemed that they were just friends, Strickland did not tell Kaitlin Armstrong, his then girlfriend, what was happening. We learned she even called him while they were out and about, and he ignored the call and then lied later about what he had been doing. So that continued kind of that narrative of, is this a love triangle? Is it not? What's going on here? Just some questionable behavior.
Yeah. But the family told us that it wasn't necessarily a love triangle. It was more professional relationship between Wilson and Colin Strickland. And even on the video from Pool Burger, you don't see them holding hands or anything like that. At some points, they're just on their phones together. It seems like they're kind of maybe looking up sponsors and things, talking amongst each other, not necessarily looking like a date.
So had they ever dated? Was there ever a dating relationship and it became professional, or?
Yeah,
a fling.
A fling, some kind of romantic involvement is how they kind of described it. That was, let's see, October 2021, I believe. Armstrong and Strickland were supposedly on a break. Armstrong seemed to paint it to friends differently, but Strickland and Wilson's family maintained that they were on a break. They had a brief fling, Strickland and Wilson did. But then ever since then, they just maintained a friendship, and they were both in the cycling world, so it was like you said, kind of a professional friendship business type of deal.
Yeah. So Meredith, the reason why the family did not like the love triangle terminology is because the relationship was really with Kaitlin Armstrong, not really Mo Wilson.
Exactly. It was a romantic relationship between Kaitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland, but as far as Mo Wilson, it was more of professional. They were just trying to progress their careers together and kind of help each other out.
Yeah. Kaitlin Armstrong was later identified as the prime suspect By then, though, she was MIA. It turned out she had fled to Costa Rica.
A first look at accused murderer Kaitlin Armstrong in custody in Costa Rica after more than a month on the run. Her long golden hair now shoulder length.
So what did we learn in the trial about what she was doing in Costa Rica? She had changed her hair. It was confirmed, right, that she had gotten the plastic surgery. Talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah, we saw before and after pictures from the plastic surgery. Even though she was very adamant about not taking pictures, the doctor did, and those were on display in the courtroom. She was going back and forth on this messaging app with the doctor about what she wanted, how much it was going to cost, and things like that. It was interesting. Costa Rica, Spanish, so we had a translator in the courtroom kind of talking about what the translations were meaning while she's talking with this doctor. But yeah, we saw pictures before and after. It was clearly her face and showed the bandages and everything. And then, yeah, she was in Costa Rica for a bit until she was caught.
I think over 40 days, or at least that was the total extent of the so-called manhunt. Another thing I thought was interesting was you're talking about the plastic surgery. That was under a different name. The amount of aliases she appeared to have used, there were a lot between, yeah, the plastic surgery receipt, I think emails she set up. I'm trying to remember, I believe names that she used to sign into yoga studios from what the U.S. Marshals were telling us. So there were a lot of maneuvers, especially with her names, changing her appearance, everything to try and stay on the run for as long as she could.
Yeah.
I thought something interesting that you told me about, because I wasn't there that morning when the U.S. Marshal testified, but for people in Costa Rica, it was a vacation, but for them, they're on the hunt. So it was like, what, a surfing competition or something?
Oh, yes, yeah. So he was just kind of walking through how they found her. I mean, they're trying to blend in because they're in this small Costa Rican town. They don't want to alert her that they're there. And so he said one part was kind of weird where they were at, a surfing competition. Everyone's focused on the surfers, and they're on the beach kind of like looking back up at the crowd, trying to see if anyone stands out. He said a lot of people looked like her down there because it is a big tourism spot, a lot of Americans down there. So it wasn't like she would stand out just because she was in a different country. So that made it difficult.
Was she working at this yoga place?
I think that she, from what I remember, she might have started already working as a yoga teacher, or at least was kind of on that route. I mean, she was living her life as far as we know down there, making friends somewhat. I think going out to the local, watering hole, doing yoga. When they found her with a bandage on her nose, supposedly from the plastic surgery, she said she was in a surfing accident. So it sounded like she was really trying to restart her life and just dive right in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It all kind of came together whenever they did find her and they went into her locker at that yoga studio, and that's where you found the receipt of the plastic surgery,
the passport,
passport and things like that. So I think that was a big deal. She had everything with her in that locker, and it showed the different names, the receipt, the passport, everything.
Did they talk about the moment of capture at the trial at all? What was that like?
Yeah, the guy who essentially found her, obviously it was a team effort. They tracked her down to this hostel, and she was in the lobby when he walked in there, which is kind of crazy. She was sitting there. He didn't quite know if it was her at first, and then what he said, and this is something new I learned, is he started, first of all, I think he told us he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. He was just trying to blend in. He started speaking Spanish to her, because he's like, if she's a local, she'll kind of understand, and they had to switch to using Google Translate, and he said she was friendly, and I think he was kind of just asking her about the area or the hostel and things like that. But he got close to her, and he said, I knew it was her. I could tell by her eyes, even though her appearance was different, he knew it in her eyes. And so I think he left, alerted the local authorities, and then they all kind of came in and picked her up. And she eventually said, at first she didn't say her real name to them. She eventually told at least one of them that she was Kaitlin Armstrong.
Yeah. And this wasn't the end of her running. Right before her trial this year, just a few months ago, she tried to escape from Travis County deputies. Take a look at that.
Travis County Sheriff's Office corrections officers were supposed to escort Armstrong from the doctor's appointment in South Austin back to the correctional complex. The officers say she had other plans, darting as they left the doctor's office. They yelled for her to stop, but she kept going for about a mile and even tried to scale a 6-foot fence. During the chase, officers say Armstrong removed her black and white striped uniform pants and had thermal pants underneath to disguise her appearance.
So we just saw her running. What happened there?
Yeah, so apparently she was at a doctor's appointment in South Austin, and the doctor had told her she didn't need leg restraints or anything. So she is at the doctor's appointment. The officers who are escorting her turn around for a moment to get some paperwork, I think, from the doctor. They turn around and Kaitlin Armstrong is gone. And she had leggings underneath her jumpsuit, so she had taken that off in, kind of more plain clothes, and was running. And it was like a 10-15 minute run before they finally caught up to her. She even tried to scale a 6-foot wall, didn't make it, and they ended up capturing her again. But I think, maybe if she scaled that 6-foot wall, who knows what would have happened. She knows how to get out of here.
Yeah.
So.
That's very true. Carissa, recently, since the trial, the DA has dismissed those charges. What does that mean?
So I talked to an attorney unaffiliated with the case to kind of break some of this down. He essentially said it's probably just to save everyone time and money. I mean, she's essentially sentenced to life in prison. She was sentenced to 90 years. She is eligible for parole after serving half of her sentence, but even then she'll be like 80 years old at least. And so I think it's just a matter of, saving time, money. She also, there's still one other charge that she could face. It's a federal charge for using her sister's passport to flee the country. That's essentially pending right now, but if they decide to officially charge her with that, she would have to go to federal court, face a judge there, and then if she's sentenced, that sentence would be tacked on to the current sentence that she's serving. So it's just either way, she's going to be in jail for a while, prison for a while.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other piece of this puzzle. We've already talked about him a little bit, Colin Strickland.
Further investigation revealed that Armstrong had dated star cyclist Colin Strickland for a few years. Last year, Strickland was romantically involved with Wilson while Strickland and Armstrong were on a brief break.
Okay, so Colin Strickland, also a pro cyclist. What was y'all's impression of him when he took the stand?
It was interesting, to say the least. Obviously you don't imagine that he's going to be happy to be there. He just lost probably a good friend. He's essentially losing his girlfriend, or realizing things that he didn't know she was capable of doing. His sponsors have dropped him. There's a lot going on. But his attitude, honestly, was just so extremely almost rebellious, like a little bit catty and rude when the attorneys were questioning him. He just did not want to be there.
Yeah, the court reporter asked so many times, "Can you please speak up?" That's her job, just to transcribe it all. And he refused. The volume never went up, so he was just talking low, could barely hear
he's sitting
him.
there like this, just kind of like so very disrespectful, honestly.
Cussed.
He did cuss a couple times.
What was the context of him cussing? You don't have to cuss, but what?
I remember the attorney asked, and maybe he did cuss more than once. The attorney asked, "Who have you talked to?" The defense attorney was questioning him, so he was extra on edge. "Who have you talked to about this case?" Because I think he took the stand Friday, and then we had the weekend, and then he came back on Monday. The attorney asked him, "Who have you talked to about the case or about your time in court over the weekend?" And he said, "I have no blank idea." So, not really, kind of just uncalled for. But it was very interesting. And then I'm sure people have seen the videos of his interactions with photographers outside of the courtroom, which again, yes, journalists, there's a camera in your face, you're annoyed, but you don't physically assault. And there's the video of him pushing down the camera of one photographer. And then another time, it looks like he intentionally steps on a guy's foot. It was the same photographer too. I don't know why if that was just coincidence or if he had certain feelings.
This was one of the other stations in town as one of their cameras.
So he was just, the last time he got called in, he brought a dog with him, which people were speculating maybe some kind of emotional support animal. Again, he's going through a lot. He's sharing his, intimate moments with women in front of a courtroom of people. It's a lot to go through. We're going through his texts, very personal stuff. But it did seem like he could have been just a little more professional about it.
A little bit more helpful too, I would say. It didn't help him in any way. Not like he, was a suspect in any way, but it just didn't make him look good.
Yeah. So before the trial, I remember Armstrong's attorney saying something to the effect of, "We can't wait for our day in trial. There's so much more you haven't heard." Did they live up to that statement, do we think?
Well, that I would say no. There were some things that we hadn't heard. And a big focus of the defense's argument was this idea of circumstantial evidence, not direct evidence tying Kaitlin Armstrong. Out of all the surveillance video, there was no surveillance video that showed her in person, that showed her vehicle, but it didn't show her there, things like that. They also talked about confirmation bias. That was another kind of catchphrase they threw around, looking at law enforcement who came in initially and thinking they kind of zoned in on the suspect so quickly. So confirmation bias is when you already kind of have the end answer you want, and then you're trying to make the evidence essentially meet that. There were a few things. There was a really strange thing that occurred the day after the murder, which was a vandalism at Armstrong and Strickland's house. And they were kind of upset that never was looked at more closely. Still, to this day, I don't really know if that was something, Armstrong did to make it look like someone else was going after them. It's kind of a weird thing, but that was a new thing we learned. They mentioned that there was a rape kit done or a test done on Moriah Wilson, and it was never actually tested. And so that was a big argument they kept bringing up, is there was this rape kit, and that was never even looked at, and so we didn't even explore that possibility of maybe she was raped and killed by someone. It's a few things here and there. I don't know if you remember anything else.
Yeah, I think the big thing was that, the state has the burden of proof. So they're trying to throw in any doubts that they could put in the jurors' minds. So the fact that there was no evidence that she was driving that vehicle, and there was no evidence that she had the phone on her, it could have been someone else texting. Or that no one saw with their own eyes or even on a video that she was the one who pulled the trigger. So I think those were just some things that they were trying to place into the jurors' minds to hopefully cause some doubt.
Yeah, so they're trying to cause doubt. Did they ever put forth any sort of alternative theories or anything like that, the defense?
Gosh, what were the alternative theories? It was more, like you said, burden of proof.
Yeah. Her alibi was that she went to she went other places, but they never tried to prove that she actually went there. They never had an alibi
for why, and that was a big thing, never had an alibi for why her Jeep was circling that area. So that was, I think, probably one of the biggest hurdles, and if you don't have an alibi. And yeah, a lot of it just picking holes at how the investigation was conducted, the handling of the evidence. One other thing that comes to mind is they had kind of a ballistics expert. That wasn't his official title, but he was on the stand for a while, and he was essentially pushing back on the theory that you can tie bullet casings to the gun, which is how they were able to link the gun that was found at Armstrong and Strickland's house back to where Moriah Wilson was killed. And so essentially they were trying to disprove that you can even do that, to show that, there's no way that her gun was used to shoot, I guess one other interesting thing that I didn't learn till the trial was that it was Colin Strickland's idea to buy the guns. I always assumed it was Kaitlin's, which doesn't necessarily mean a lot, and I think she planted some seeds of saying she didn't feel safe and things like that. But it was actually his idea to buy those guns. He purchased them, that kind of thing. And, of course, the defense tried to emphasize that as well. So.
And it's not like she went to the gun range by herself when she got the gun. She went with her sister. She went with a friend. So that's another thing.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the verdict and the trial. The trial lasted about 2 weeks, and it didn't take the jury very long to give her 90 years.
Kaitlin Armstrong will likely spend the rest of her life behind bars for the murder of pro cyclist Anna Moriah Wilson.
Today, the jury sentenced her to 90 years in prison.
So they came back guilty, and later they decided 90 years. I think it was also a $10,000 fine. Is that right? Were you surprised by the verdict?
I was not surprised by the verdict. I think I was a little surprised by the sentencing. I remember the state, when they addressed the jury ahead of the sentencing, you know, they're trying to convince them which way or another. Even the state attorney, I believe, asked for at least 40 years. So, you know, even they weren't pushing for the max. And just, yeah, I don't know. I was a little surprised. Granted, I've never sat in a murder trial before, but she didn't get the max. I think the max is 99 technically, but she got pretty close.
Yeah, they went well beyond what the state was asking
Basically,
for.
yeah.
So did the
double.
verdict surprise you, or was it sentencing?
It did kind of surprise me. I feel like I've seen a bunch of sentences that are like 30 years or so for murders. So 90 is a long time.
Yeah. I think it definitely seemed to surprise her sister too. I looked over when they announced the sentence, and she just put her hand over her mouth in shock and then started weeping. The whole courtroom could hear her crying. It was actually really devastating. Her and her sister seemed to be very close. And then she at one point just ran out of the courtroom crying. So
how did Kaitlin react? What was her face like?
I did not see a reaction from her ever.
Yeah.
To be fair, you're sitting
see,
behind her,
yeah.
so you can't see her eyes. The most you can see is kind of a side profile. But even when Moriah's mom is talking, even when Kaitlin Armstrong's parents are talking, I mean, I don't know if you could see any reaction.
It's a statue.
The whole trial.
The whole time. I wouldn't say, you know, even like swaying or moving her hands or any. It was just a statue the entire time, I would say.
It did seem very emotionless. I mean, the most that I saw from her or could see was when she goes up to the judge after she's sentenced and she's walking out of the courtroom, and maybe you've seen that video, so you can see her full face, and there's still not a lot of emotion, but you can see her the entire time she's walking. She's making eye contact with her family or her sister, and her eyes look a little apologetic, I would say, like a little sad and just like trying to speak through her eyes to her sister. That's it though. That's all I saw.
Yeah, that's the only real reaction, I would say.
Yeah.
At points she would talk with her attorneys, but very just and then done. So.
Interesting. Victim impact statements. What stood out there?
Oh man.
So incredibly sad. Anna Moriah Wilson's mother spoke about just how special of a child she was and how her career was just getting started, and she had so much more life to live, and her career, and they were so proud of her. She was just about to stop her full-time job and do this full-time, and they were excited to see where she was going to go, and I think this was just devastating for her entire family. And I guess it was during COVID, her brother had stayed with her, and so they got really close during that time. He said she was her best friend and was there for him during that entire time he was going through a rough patch. So it was emotional, very emotional.
Yeah.
Tears.
From the mom, and then Caitlin Cash spoke again. That was her good friend that found her dead. I think that was probably the most emotional. You could just sense the courtroom was feeling and reacting, and I thought it was neat. It's neat though. It seemed like both Cash and then Moriah's mom seemed pretty gracious in their approach to Kaitlin. So that's what I didn't realize is with the victim impact statements. Correct me if I'm wrong, but instead of addressing the jury when they first testified, they're addressing Kaitlin specifically, this woman who's just been found guilty of murdering their daughter and their friend. And it wasn't, obviously they're sad at the loss and just angry and confused, but the way they kind of ended their conversation, or their talk rather, was very gracious and hoping that, hoping the best for her, kind of.
That hoping she finds God and that she finds happiness, and that she's not sad and lonely and whatnot.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I thought that was neat.
Since the trial, the appeal process already in motion, I assume they're going to have to figure out something went wrong in the trial. It's going to have an appeal work.
Yes, and that process, I did not know this process at all, so this is why I interview an attorney about it. It can be very long. Basically, her appellate attorney is going to have to start. They'll get the transcripts from the court reporter, go through each and everything. She could come back and say that she finds, I guess, nothing wrong. I think that's called an Anders brief. But otherwise, obviously, the goal is to find something that went wrong, and they present a brief, and then the state can present an opposing brief, and then they'll go before a judge, and then there's still a lot of that back and forth that can continue, and then they can reappeal if it doesn't work out. So basically it never ends.
Appeals,
Or it's gonna be a while.
appeals.
Yeah.
Until there's no more appeals.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
she's not up for parole for 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah.
Meredith, Carissa, thank you so much. Appreciate your insight. You can find more digital exclusive shows like this one on our website, fox7austin.com, on our YouTube channel, also on our new connected TV app.